You're watching Voices in Mystery, and I'm your host, Nancy Carlson. This is our 13th season, and our author with us right now is P.J. Grondin. Pete, actually it is.
That's right.
Hi, Pete.
How do you do, Nancy?
This is your first time on the show.
Yes, it is.
You live in Sandusky, Ohio.
That's correct.
And
right.
do you write full-time, or do you also work another job?
I work another job. I actually work at a nuclear power plant, Davis-Besse, outside of, between Toledo and Sandusky.
Ooh, that's interesting. Are you going to have a book about nuclear accidents, or is that too close to your own lifetime?
My next book actually is called The Lifetime of Terror, tentatively, and it is going to involve a terrorist attack on a nuclear power plant as well as a terrorist attack at the same time on a refinery in Texas.
Are you worried that you might get terrorists' ideas?
No, I think they have enough ideas already.
I think so. It's in the news every day.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your latest book.
Latest book, A Lifetime of Exposure, is starring the McKinney brothers, who were in all three novels. The McKinney brothers were a couple of guys who started out on the wrong foot in the first novel, but they turned over a new leaf by the time they get to A Lifetime of Exposure. And they work with law enforcement at this point to try and break a child pornography ring. In the process of searching for, the perpetrators of this ring, they come across a website that involves rich professional people outside the area of Washington, D.C., in the area around Quantico Marine Base. And this site purportedly features people who are willing participants in this sales of pornography over the internet, live shots. It turns out that they're not so willing. They don't know that they're being filmed. They don't know that their images are out on the internet. So the brothers are working with law enforcement to try and figure out what's going on in that particular case.
Ooh, how prevalent is child pornography?
Far too much, and it's very hard to track down. In my research, it's a difficult nut to crack.
How did you do research on it without getting in trouble yourself, as far as
I read mostly, yeah.
You mostly read. You didn't do it online.
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I've never viewed child pornography online, but there is so much information out there about the ability to view it if you wanted to, that it's easy to get to. And the good part about the story is it doesn't focus in on child pornography. It's a very, very minor part of the story. It's how they get into this situation. But the prevalence of it is that it's very, very difficult for law enforcement to break these rings, because it's very hard to track people down through the internet.
Is it easier for people like your fictional McKinney brothers to get information because they live on a edgier side of life than you and I probably do?
Yeah, I would think so. They are really, when it comes down to it, they have kind of turned over a new leaf. They've married. The one brother, Pat, has children. The one brother, Joe, has a fiance. So they've kind of turned away from the seedy side of life, and but they know the seedy people from their past. They know how they operate and things like that. So
were they thugs or small-time criminals, or? Well,
they started out being kids in high school and just out of high school who were, smoking pot, and then they decided to start selling pot to support their habit. And then before they knew it, they were starting to sell a lot of pot, making a lot of money. And before they really figured out that they were in trouble, they were into a very large volume business, making a lot of cash. And they, at one point, decided, we've got to figure out how to get out of this, because it's not right. We're not doing the right thing. We're on the wrong path. We need to get away from it. And
in your books, is there a model or a mentor that had helped them steer towards the right way of behaving? Or?
No, I think they just kind of figured it out on their own. Their parents had brought them up a certain way, and they still maintained all those lessons within them. And then once they started getting off that path, they kind of figured out, this isn't right. We really need to get back to living a clean life.
You don't sound like a guy who works at a nuclear power plant. You sound like a high school counselor, somebody that could help steer students to a good life.
Right.
So.
I have a son and a daughter. They're both grown now, but through the lessons that I've learned through my life and trying to pass that on to them, you find out that kids don't always do what they are told, and so it's becoming a counselor, being a parent, and it's too bad there's not a book out on it that you can just go through the manual and check the things off that you need to make sure they understand. By the time you figure all that out, they've pretty much made up their own mind on what they want to do. So, but they're both doing very well. So I'm real pleased at the way the paths that they've chosen.
Now, do the McKinney brothers? Do you have a whole lot of ideas for them that you've jotted down? And can this go on and on?
I've got another book. I'm writing A Lifetime of Terror. I have another book beyond that, which would be the sequel to the second book, A Lifetime of Deception, where one of the bad guys comes back and tries to exact revenge on the people that did him wrong in the second book. And then I have another book that I'm tentatively writing, but I'm thinking about switching gears and writing a different detective story in the first person. These are written in third person. Thinking about shifting gears and writing a series on a former FBI agent who has turned to consultant and basically does high-tech consulting for law enforcement agencies, but he also does investigations on the side. He basically gets drawn into them. So I'm kind of thinking about another series, a little bit shorter book, a little bit more action type oriented books.
Where are your books set? Where do the McKinney brothers live?
The McKinney brothers live in Central Florida, in the Orlando and Dunellen area. They were born in Ohio. They moved actually to Anderson, Indiana for a brief period, and then their parents moved them to Florida, and that's where they grew up, as kids. And so they stayed there after that. The stories from the first all the way through the third so far take place either in Central Florida, along the East Coast outside military bases, or there's one major section of the book, the second book, A Lifetime of Deception, which takes place in North Dakota. Starts out basically in North Dakota.
And you know Central Florida? Do you?
Yes, I lived in the Orlando area for about 10 years. I was born in Sandusky, moved to Michigan, moved to Florida, moved back to Sandusky when I was an adult, and then spent 8 years in the U.S. military. So I spent 8 years on submarines and in the nuclear Navy. Which
brings you to your current job, perhaps?
That's correct, exactly.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you. PJ, you write by PJ, but you go by, your name is Pete.
That's correct, right.
PJ Grondin. He has several books. The latest is A Lifetime of Exposure, a book about the McKinney brothers who are amateur detectives and they help the police. Thank you so much for being on Voices in Mystery. I hope you'll come back often.